Can you afford to buy a property in the eastern suburbs? Here we are today in Paddington, 3 kilometres east of the CBD, one of the most popular inner city locations of the east. According to CoreLogic, as of March 21, the median house price for properties in Paddington is $2.5 million, and for apartments it's $825,000. Let's have a look at some examples of what that median price gets you in Paddington. This property at 30 Boundary Street sold for $2.55 million. It is on 127 square metres of land. It's a dual level terrace comprising 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms and parking for 1 car. This property represents the average terrace in Paddington. 40 Stevens Street, Paddington is a representation of an average apartment around that $800,000 price point. The property is 45 square metres. It includes parking for 2 cars. It is a 2-bedroom apartment built in the 1970s with 1 bathroom within a complex of 66 apartments. If you are looking at Stevens Street as an investment property, the return would be approximately $550 a week or just under $30,000 a year in rental return. Once we factor in the outgoings, which includes strata, council, water, insurance, and property management fees, your net income is approximately $20,000 a year. Assuming you put down 20% deposit and have an 80% loan over this investment property, it is a 30-year term and you're paying principal and interest repayments at 2.5% interest. Your shortfall would be approximately $11,000 per annum to cover the investment property. Houses in Paddington on average rent out for just over $1,000 a week, resulting in an annual gross yield of 2.2%. Units rent out on average for $450 a week, resulting in a gross yield of 2.8%.
As Kelly mentioned, in beautiful downtown Paddington, you're looking at about $2.5 million for a terrace and about $825,000 is the median price for an apartment. First things first, we need to work towards that deposit. If we're looking to build a 20% deposit on that $2.5 million terrace, then we're going to need just over $500,000 to get us there. If we're looking to buy that $825,000 apartment, we're going to need $165,000 deposit. And in both scenarios, that'll get us that 20% to avoid lender's mortgage insurance. If you're looking to drive towards that deposit that little bit faster, you may want to consider the First Home Super Saver scheme. And that's something you can utilise if you've never purchased a property here in Australia before. The second thing to consider when purchasing that beautiful terrace or that apartment is obviously stamp duty. Here in New South Wales, stamp duty still exists, although there's constant talk about whether it's going to be abolished or not. Unfortunately, it's a tax we still have to pay. On that $2.5 million terrace, you're going to be hit up for nearly $125,000 in stamp. On that apartment, you're probably looking at closer to $32,000. In New South Wales, there is a concession up to $800,000, but unfortunately with the median price in Paddington looking at $825,000, that's not going to do us too much good. The biggest mistake I see people make when they're working towards building that deposit to buy their first home or investment property is they save whatever's left over at the end of each month. What that means is it gives you absolutely no clarity as to when you're going to be able to achieve that goal. If you're working towards that $825,000 apartment here in Paddington, we're going to need $165,000 for the deposit, and we're going to need about $32,500 for stamp duty. So in total, we're going to need $197,500. If you save $3,000 per month, I can guarantee you that in just over 5 years, you'll be able to purchase that property.
Based on the last 5 years of sales, Paddington saw a compounded growth rate of 34% for houses and 23% for units.
Assuming you purchase that $2.5 million property and put forward a $500,000 deposit, you'll be taking out a $2 million loan. With repayments of $8,500, assuming a 3% interest rate, that loan's going to take you 30 years to pay off. And if you have the ability to put an extra $1,000 per month against that mortgage, you're going to pay it off 5 years faster. If you have the ability to put an extra $3,000 per month against that mortgage, you'll wipe a decade off the loan. One of the most common mistakes we see people make is they start using their offset account like a little bit of a slush fund, dipping into it all the time. And where they were previously saving and diligently putting money into that offset account, it's starting to plateau, which is then pushing that goal back of being completely debt-free and financially independent.
My top tip if you're searching for a terrace in Paddington is to look at the width of the property. If you have at least 4.5 meters width, then that'll allow you to have a hallway and a living space, as opposed to just opening the door straight into living. Also, it would allow you to have a wider bedroom with space for storage on the second story. My other top tip for Paddington is also to consider the western side of Oxford Street. The terraces are grander and the streets are wider, and they trade at a cheaper price to the eastern side.
When thinking about your overall wealth, it's really important to think about your goals and how they fit together. I love property. I'm invested in real property. What you need to realize is if you are buying that $2.5 million terrace and paying $8,500 per month for the next 30 years, you may not have that disposable income to really diversify your wealth. If you, however, purchased a $2 million property with repayments of $6,500, you may have disposable income to build out a diversified stock portfolio, potentially buy an investment property, pay off that debt sooner, or invest additional funds into superannuation, which can be a really tax-effective strategy.